Hi guys. I hope you can hear this. Yeah, the mic seems to be working. So welcome to my second live stream. Hopefully we won't be disturbed because my son is actually napping right next to me here on the floor. So since there's a one person watching, so I'll actually start with a few personal updates because the last few days were crazy. Um, So the first thing is, let me see if I can. I don't know if you can. Let me see if I can find it here. The Schumann resonance um, for the 23rd of April, which was really insane. So on the 23rd, which was Thursday, I had a crazy day. Like really, I was feeling extremely depressed. Oh, you can't see it now anymore, but I'll just put a link or a screenshot or something, or in the next video I'll show you the spike on the 23rd of April. It was crazy, and I really felt like really depressed. Like nothing mattered anymore. Like nothing had any meaning. No desires. I had this yoga mat that I'm using for doing various things like qigong and meditation, and I felt like doing nothing. Like honestly nothing. And I just wanted to spend the day on that mattress, to be honest. Even had thoughts of suicide, like just giving the universe the finger, saying, "Screw all this, screw it all. I don't care anymore." A really weird experience, and thankfully my wife was there to kind of snap me out of it. But then Yara, which is a channel that I follow on YouTube, and I like her quite a lot. She has a very good insight into plenty of things. Posted a video yesterday sharing that same experience, and I'm like, wow, okay, that must have been something. And I rarely have those kind of synchronous kind of feelings or events. Usually, like I see the Schumann resonance spike, and I'm like, what was I doing that day? Nothing special. But there, it was really, I don't know if it was my time or something, but it was just crazy and insane. So that's that. I ended up sleeping in my clothes, like not even washing, just screw it all. And the next day, the 24th of April, was my birthday, actually. So I had a nice little birthday party. Nevertheless, I kind of slept on it, and I felt better the next day. And what I did, sometimes we just have some spiritual fun with my wife. So I decided to call some spirits to my birthday party, since as I'm confined and everybody's confined, can't really have a big birthday party. So you may as well invite some spirits. So I said, any spirit that wants to show up, you're welcome to come. And I cannot see any of that, actually. I can only feel my palms getting hot, and I'm like, okay, something happened. My wife sees everything, though, so we form a quite interesting team. And I almost find that it was meant to be, because she's the kind of person that doesn't give a crap at all about all this ascension stuff. She just wants to have her farm with some animals, and she could care less about all this spiritual stuff. I mean, she's interested. She's just she's not gonna pursue this at all costs and chat with spirits and ask complicated questions. And I'm the exact opposite. I mean, I want to know everything. I'm just so curious that if I could talk to spirits, I'd probably spend my life doing that. I'd probably completely forget about my body, forget about everything, and just ask questions. So it's a kind of a good filter for me to have my wife, and it's like she's saying, okay, stop. This is annoying me now. Let's stop this game. Because otherwise I would be only doing that, and I'd be completely... So I'm really unbalanced in that sense, as far as my crown chakra, very open. My root chakra is like very bad. So in any case, I invited some spirits to show up. And so she's like, okay, they want you to give a speech. And I was like sharing my insights about the birth of humanity. And then my wife says, they're laughing at you. And I'm like, what? What do you mean they're laughing at me? And so I asked her to ask them what's so funny, and they're like, "Oh, it's cute. He actually thinks they're already ready to be born." And that was kind of a hit. And they basically told me, your Earth ascending is, if you want to use that metaphor, then it's more like a woman that is going higher in vibration in the very early stages of pregnancy, so she doesn't get sick. So she doesn't have like those first trimester sickness and vomiting and feeling nauseated and everything. So it's like Earth is just ascending and vibrating higher because she just wants to have a nice, smooth pregnancy, no complications. And so, and this is something that is typical with me, is that I'm talking about things way ahead of time. So I'm not really in my time. I was talking about VR, for instance, like 10 years ago when nobody knew what it even was. The same for like blockchain, and like there's plenty of things that I was talking about well before many people was in the mainstream. And I think in spirituality, I'm kind of repeating that same mistake. Like I'm really ahead of myself. And even though like my insights might be interesting, they're not necessarily timely. So apparently birth, nah. But the nice part is that I was really frustrated with that answer. So I really wanted to clarify. And there, it really helped to have insights from two persons. So two people. There was one is a French clairvoyant. His name is Christophe Alain. And basically what he's saying is that what's happening to us now as a collective is that humanity as a collective had only one chakra active, the root chakra. That is, it could only think about survival. And it's true if you look at the way that we've designed our systems, whether it is for food or for anything else, it's more out of fear of famine and fear for our own survival. The same for governments, the same for everything. Like really, it's about fear, control, fearing for our own survival more than this idea of, love and real connection. And so apparently what is available to us now is that the second chakra of the global being that we represent is active. And that means that now humans can start to have relationships on a much larger scale, which are not only based on fear and survival, like nations, for instance, protecting their borders and fearing the outside influence and fearing for the survival of the nation, but really something more harmonious where it's more like the micro is going macro, so the relationships that you have with your family members, you're not really afraid that your family members are going to kill you or oppress you or whatever, and you have this kind of balanced relationships that is available to us at a global level, which might feel like a form of new rebirth, I guess. Just like during pregnancy, you have different stages, like the stage when the heart starts beating, the stage where certain organs develop, the stage where the soul comes in and incarnates, the stage where all the organs function together. And those are very key moments, still very important, but nowhere near as transcendental as the birth process. So yeah, apparently birth is not around the corner. It's more like in a couple thousand years, because obviously we need to have all our 7 chakras active as far as humanity, as the global organism, before we can be born. And so the third chakra is the solar plexus, which is on a global scale will be more our relationship to the universe. And so first chakra, survival, we had hints of the second chakra, a little bit before it really fully activated, which is now. That is, we started to see that people could start to relate to each other without this kind of fear-based, survival-based approach. Now it's fully available to us, which means the third chakra is starting to emerge. And that's why we're saying that we might have disclosure, we might enter into contact with other civilizations, is because the third chakra is just only being built. The second one is operational. The third one is just being built, is like ignited. And so in the next few hundred or thousands of years, we will have to sort our what we want our relationship to be with the outside, like outside our planet. And the second chakra is obviously very important, so that we have to first function well globally as a society, as a planet, before and have this kind of homogeneous understanding of belonging to humanity, rather than fighting between ourselves, before we can even envisage having contacts with the outside, because that would just it would just rip us apart if we wouldn't have that second chakra fully available to us. So in one way it might still be as magical as a moment as birth to us subjectively, not having known anything better and being fully in this 3D matrix and all that stuff. But it's not as transcendental as the actual birth. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. Just a little bit of background here. So then I don't know if there are 3 people here, so I don't know if the chat is working. Hi guys, let's see. If you have any questions now, otherwise it'll just go to the list of questions that people have left me with. So there was one question about, can you explain a plane of existence in which there's no duality, in which multiple experiences is reasonable? So that was a question left in my first Q&A. Well, first of all, I don't think there's a plane of existence without duality. What there is a plane of existence with a duality that is so well integrated that it looks like unity. And I always like to give the example of the atom, which is a sort of duality, but so well balanced that it is one. You have the electron circling around, and then the proton in the inside, and it's something harmonious. It's not imbalanced in any way, but it sort of combines and reconciles polarities. And so it's not about not having duality. It's about sort of fusing or harmonizing duality within yourself, and then that unlocking new experiences on the outside. But it's very hard to describe an experience without duality once we are outside of duality, or rather what I'd like to say is once we've integrated duality within us. The only way that I can sort of give an example to that is the difference between the experience of individual cells floating in the ocean and the experience of cells inside of your body. So on the one hand, those cells did not understand that they form a coherent whole, like a unit, and do not function like that either. They eat each other. They react in very chaotic ways, one to another, fight for food and resources. And then on the other hand, you have cells that in your body that realize that they're part of a unit, and that unlocks a completely different experience. But still, if you look inside the body, you still have immune cells that fight other cells, like bacteria that try to invade your body. And so it's really outside of duality. It's more it's not that you get rid of violence. It's that when there is violence, it is completely aligned with, I don't know, like the experience you're supposed to have, and it's not in a kind of a hate, or there's no positive or negative emotion. You're just doing what you're meant to do. I don't know, I guess maybe some police officers that have this idea of justice, of divine justice, and act in a very neutral way, like not believing that they're doing good or evil, just doing what they're meant to do. Maybe that gives you a hint of how our immune system probably functions. Those cells probably don't say, oh my God, the bacteria are invading the body. Let's mount a hate campaign against them, and let's make sure they don't exist or whatever, something like that. I think they're just saying, I'm an immune cell. This is what I'm meant to do. I'm meant to defend the body against bacteria, and so that's what I'm doing. With no judgment, no harsh feelings. Maybe that's kind of what I imagine a non-dual experience to be. Is it's not that the world would be different. It's that the intentions and the polarities that you put behind your actions are not present anymore. So when you do anything, you don't think of it in terms of good or bad. You do it as in, am I aligned with my higher purpose or something like that? So yeah, that's an answer to that question. Then there was a question from Amanda. I had a thought the other day that a lot of us suddenly find ourselves on this ascending consciousness journey, take a similar path. It seems imminent and at first sometimes frightening, and there's an urgency to it, and then it sort of smooths out. A lot of us are stating the same information in similar ways. My thought was, we recorded sounds of our planet and our voices and messages of greetings and sent it out into space. What if other beings sent us a message about consciousness evolution that feels like live information, but is really just a consciousness stream that was sent out who knows when for us to pick up on and use it at will? I actually really like that idea. I think it's definitely a matter of tuning into things. I like this this metaphor of the radio stations always being present. And if your brain is like the receiver, then you can tune into different radio stations. And if you tune to other higher, quote unquote, higher frequencies, then you just tune into other frequencies that were always there. It's just that it was you, the problem, quote unquote. I mean, it's. I think I like to go back to evolution and experience. Like, for instance, imagine the first fish that had to crawl out of the ocean, and the more it was sort of popping its head out of the water, and the more time it spent out of the water, the more everything in that fish transformed, and it transformed its entire experience. But that outside world, the land and everything, it was already there. It's just the fish that needed to sort of transform itself to be ready for that new environment. And so I think in a similar way, I mean, we're swimming in a sea of information. In my understanding, all the information anyways exists everywhere all the time. Just like the Akashic records, you can access them from any place. It's not like you have to move somewhere to access them. But here is just like being strategic about what we choose to connect to and what we're capable of doing. It's like this fish. I mean, if it stayed out of the water too much compared to what it's able to do at any stage, then it would just die. But if it stayed in the water too much, then it wouldn't change. So there is this, I don't know how to say, there's this, the right balance, I guess, between doing something new and, I mean, like this catch up, there's this catch up between what your body can handle, what your beliefs can handle, and gradually moving upwards for having a broader experience. Now, on the fact that those informations might have been sent by other races and civilizations, ultimately, I think that God or the cosmos or the universe works very much like a brain, which wants to kind of find a way to make bridges and make connections between all of its parts. You know, it's almost like if God sort of split into trillions and trillions of neurons in an empty void of infinite potential. And then those neurons sort of tried to find a way to make connections, to make sense of that infinite potential and infinite possibilities. And so ultimately, in the end, I think everything is connected to everything. And that's when sort of God becomes aware, self-aware in the experience of itself, not just in the isness. So I am, okay, fine, but what am I? That's the question. And so, like, one vision that I had is basically that, it's almost as if you spew out consciousness in the middle of nothing, or infinite potential, and then it tried to find meaning, find some things, find its way back to oneness, and it was starting to grab whatever experiences were there, dragons, unicorns, blah blah blah, and try to make sense of it, and trying to find its way back to two things. First is finding its way back to void. So how is it even existing from void? And that's what we've done. If you look at it, like, we're always trying to reverse engineer, how come we're here? What are we doing here? And first it's the biblical story. The earth was created by God 6,000 years ago. And then that story sort of gets longer and longer. And, science also says basically we're coming from nothing. So it's that one thing is, and I explained this in my previous spiritual brainstorm. If you check it out, I think it's number 38. There's one, like, you just launch a stream of consciousness and it tries to find it sense and meaning in what it's doing there in the middle of infinite potential. And sorry. So it's trying to find its way back to void and trying to find its way back to infinity, which is God in form, I guess, but that is aware of itself as infinity and not as void. And in that process, of course, since everything is related to everything else, then, we sending messages is something that it's like a neuron launching, so trying to find, like, launching a thread to connect to something, and there's other neurons that are trying to connect here. And it's the same thing as someone with amnesia, I guess, when you take them to places they know, or you talk to them about something, you're trying to make those neural connections that will sort of unlock certain things, like, oh wow, I remember now, this is my mom and this is that, and it's just this game played at a much, much higher level. So that was a question from Amanda. I hope I answered that in the right way. So there's this question also. I wonder if, since you really identify with this whole birth analogy thing, do you know if you had a traumatic birth when you were born? So, so I had a very long one. I don't know if it was traumatic. I'd have to ask my mom. Apparently it was painful and it was long, but as far as my subjective experience of it, I don't have any memories, but maybe it would be good to sort of, I don't know, ask an intuitive or a clairvoyant. But the reason I'm using those metaphors is for a very specific reason, and it's because ultimately, if you look at how you can create, hi Kelly, how you can create experience out of oneness, is there an outside to oneness? Is there an outside to God? Is there an outside? There is no outside. There's only an inside, actually. There cannot be an outside to unity, to oneness, because it's all one. Even when if you say there's an outside and an inside, then it's not oneness. Then it's two. And the only way it can create an outside is by looking at the oneness from different angles and projecting that on a virtual or an illusory outside that doesn't exist before. So the easy metaphor is like pure white light that goes through a prism and then it splits into all the different colors. But there, notice that the colors are already nicely organized and harmonized. Here, think more of pure white light that has no outside, and it looks at itself via different angles and sees only red or only blue. And then those colors take on a consciousness of their own and an ego, if you want. and try to protect themselves. Like red tries to protect its existence and blue tries to protect its existence, and then they interact. And it's easier with colors than with sounds because it's more visual, but ultimately it starts with sounds. But I'll just skip to the lights part because it's more visual and more intuitive. And so then blue and red try to organize in a way that makes sense, in a harmonious way, try to find a way to relate to each other that is harmonious. And that game repeats itself continuously. So once light has figured out sort of how to make sense of all those colors, then again it looks on the inside and looks at like rainbows from the inside and what it can do with those. And then it creates matter, it creates subparticles, it creates atoms, it creates and every time it's the same process. So the living cell, imagine the living cell is just this one idea that looks at itself from different perspectives. And then those different perspectives take on a life of their own, which is an illusion, but informs that cell of how they can sort of merge together to form something greater than the sum of its parts, which is us. And so we've done the same thing. All of this world that is on the outside is just a projection from an idea, basically, that is like the human, what you can do with a human, projected, like looked at from different angles, different perspectives, the Kanye West perspective, the Donald Trump perspective, the me perspective. And then we are in this sort of illusion. We think we're on the outside. We're actually just projecting the inside outside. And we're having this experience trying to see how we can make that fit, and then repeat the process again and again and again. That is creating all the time an illusion outside, which is just looking at different angles of yourself from the inside and projecting it out. That is the only way that you can create an outside to oneness. And the reason why I'm always using the birth metaphor is because since you're projecting what you are, what you've experienced on the outside, then ultimately all the answers can be found within. And so I always use metaphors about living cells, or about the organs in our body, or things like that, or the brain, because ultimately we've just projected on the outside a much more complex world of what we think we are, or what we understand of ourselves on the inside. And many spiritual teachings have said the same. I mean, if you read the Bible, it often says, the kingdom of God is within. And I mean, there's so many spiritual texts are saying, look within, look within, look within, and the answers are within. And indeed, I mean, it's just about becoming aware of that process, and then just finding this harmony that is within you, that is encoded in your body, because it works. It already figured itself out, sort of, and then replicating it on the outside, and then the rest is just a fractal, an adventure. A dream, as you say, like a dream within a dream within a dream, but with an awesome experience to boot. So, so I'm using this metaphor because ultimately it's always when you look within and you look at things that you know from your own experience, that you can understand what's happening to you on the outside the best. Otherwise, you're getting lost in all the talk and everything, and especially you get caught up in all this dual understanding of good and evil and all of those things. Whereas when you take that higher perspective, it sort of all clicks and makes sense without the necessity to find this battle between good and evil and all those things. So there was something else here, another question. This is the first time we're evolving into 5D to take our physical bodies with us. I wonder why the universe wants our physical bodies to be able to do this. There's obviously some kind of goal here. Sometimes I wonder if God wants to be with us inside creation. So here's the thing. I mean, like I said, if all is mind, then my vision is that these neurons try to make connections, and it's almost as if all of these building blocks or ideas sort of appeared and then tried to reverse engineer themselves. So the living cell appeared suddenly, instantly. The idea of the human appeared instantly, and the idea of spiritual beings appeared instantly, and all that. And all those are trying to make connections to each other to see how you can build an actual experience, a linear experience, or a gradual experience out of something that just is at a certain moment. Like, boom, you exist there. You are an angel. You are this. You are that. And so why we want to take our physical bodies with us? Well, ultimately, it's making that bridge between two dimensions and two experiences. It's as if you had like two isolated neurons in a brain and no connection, and you had to sort of jump through the void to go from one to the other. Like you die in the 3D sort of bubble or whatever, neuron or whatever you want to call it, and then you go into the void as a spirit or back to God or whatever, and then you can go back to 5D or 6D or whatever and have another experience in another part that is isolated. And I think the reason why we're taking our physical bodies with us is just to make that connection, to make that bridge that will allow for a continuous experience throughout, and not this jumping, or this this gap where you have to die in order to go to another place. So it's that's the way I see it, at least. So there's only 2 people I can see here. If you have any more questions, by the way, here it says God was with us in the Garden of Eden before sin or errors were introduced into creation. So I think in my video about what was it? Maybe it was the ultimate guide to ascension, 3D to 5D. I was explaining that Adam and Eve is or represent that idea of the human as a spirit, as a pure idea that is in another realm. And the fall of man, or biting of the apple, the process of incarnating, the fact that you're no longer just a pure idea, like a man and a woman, humans, but a specific man or a specific woman incarnated in flesh and doing things, and not having that connection to the ultimate. But it's, again, to me, it's not a bad process. It's just that it's like the living cell was trying to reach all the way up to the idea of a human. And you had fractals, and it split into, plenty of animals and apes and everything. And then the man, from the top, the idea of the man was trying to reach down to help biology sort of, make that connection or that bridge to the pure idea of the human. Those two sort of ideas, that sit outside of time, those kind of universal building blocks for the universe to play with. And so man reaches down towards apes, and apes kind of, look up to the sky to try to evolve and make that connection. And then at some point they connect. And that's the story of the Anunnaki, the story of the Arcturians, and the fact that we are half alien and whatever. That's how it manifests in our reality. But on a deeper level, it's just the way the universe works, is that it starts with pure ideas, pure building blocks that just try to find how you can sort of merge and connect. And so what we're also trying to do right now with going into 5D is, okay, how do you merge with experiences like unicorns or dragons, or how do you make sense of that? How can you experience them physically, even though it's irrational from your timeline or your understanding of the universe? And there you can, for instance, think of the movie Matrix, where your brain is projected into a virtual environment where you still feel everything as if it were real, but it's not real. And therefore there's an explanation. There is a sort of a logical way that goes from nothing to experiencing even irrational things, but it makes sense. And it's connected to the void, and it's connected to, It's not just an experience you're having and you have no idea how come you're having it. So I think like the universe is kind of like this giant puzzle that's trying to figure out how to fit those pieces together. And at some point, like, going from past to future is not so much time, it's rather logic that is changing. Logic as in, how can you stitch different experiences to each other? How can you make sense of them? And so in an earlier universe, you had unicorns, dragons, fairies, all kinds of other things that were there. You had no idea how to, it's like if you just take all those characters, put them in a pot, shake it up and improvise a story, and just makes no sense. And then gradually the universe tries to make sense of all those ideas. Okay, how come they exist? Okay, that's how they got created. Okay, and it makes connections with everything. And once the connections are made between everything, it sort of understands itself. And then the experience that it had in rebuilding itself then is another kind of seed or sort of a source of inspiration for creating even more complex universes. So it's the same process like with music creation. Like you listen to symphonies, you listen to music, and that gives you inspiration, or you experience things, and that gives you inspiration to create your own stuff. So I'm done with the questions that I had from the last chat. I only see 2 people connected. Sorry I didn't give heads up regarding this live sooner. So if you have any questions, or just say hi in the chat so I know who came. If you don't have any questions, then I'll call this. I'll call this. I'll put this to an end. So it doesn't seem like anyone is typing or has any questions. Right. So if you don't have any further questions, then see you, I guess, in the next live or the next video, because I had the day after or the few days after my deep despair moment, I had another few downloads and revelations. So I'll probably do another like spiritual brainstorm about this idea of expansion and the different perspectives on the expansion of source and the experience we're having using nice little metaphors as always. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.